I knew it was wrong the second her lips touched mine, but she didn't stop. Neither did I. What was supposed to be one reckless night turned into something we couldn't undo. I'd always known there was something different about Emma. Maybe it was the way she sat in the front row, shoulders straight, pencil tapping lightly as if keeping rhythm with her thoughts, or how her eyes flicked toward me whenever I laughed at something stupid during study group. She wasn't like the others. She had that quiet, composed energy that made people underestimate her, but when she smiled, it was like she was aware of how much control she had over the room. I'd crushed on her for months. Secretly, of course. I mean, she was a straight-A student. Literally and figuratively straight, the kind of girl who corrected the professor when he misquoted a theorem, the kind of girl who ironed her shirts and color-coded her notes. I was her opposite. Out, confident, sometimes reckless. She'd helped me study for finals last semester and somehow became my closest friend, though I'd never dared to test the boundaries. That night, the campus library was nearly empty. The only sounds were the hum of the air conditioner and the rustle of notebook pages. Emma sat across from me, her glasses slipping down her nose as she scribbled formulas. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, but strands kept falling over her cheek, catching the glow of the desk lamp. I'd stopped pretending to read my notes a long time ago. I was just watching her. She caught me once and smiled faintly. "You're staring again," she murmured. Not looking up from her notebook, I grinned, pretending not to care. "Maybe I'm just admiring how dedicated you are." "You mean boring," she said, pushing her glasses up. "You make me sound like I have no life." I shrugged. "You're the one who studies until midnight on a Friday. That's a choice." She laughed softly, the sound small but warm, and for a moment, everything felt easy. When the clock struck 11, she closed her notebook and leaned back. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I need a break." I raised an eyebrow. "Emma, saying you need a break is like a robot admitting it dreams." She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was something else there. Hesitation, nervous energy. She looked down, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. I nodded, suddenly alert. You're into girls, right?" The question was careful, almost whispered. I felt my chest tighten. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I thought you knew that." "I did. I mean, everyone does." Her eyes flicked up to mine. "I've just been wondering what it's like, being with a girl." My breath caught. "Being with a girl?" I repeated, trying to sound casual, but my heart was pounding. "You mean emotionally or physically?" she said before I could finish. The word hung between us like a secret that had escaped. I stared at her, searching for a hint of a joke, but she was serious. Her face was pink. Her lips parted slightly as she exhaled. I don't know why I'm asking this. She stopped, covering her face with her hands. God, this is stupid. I leaned forward, voice low. "Hey, it's not stupid." "It is," she muttered, eyes dropping. "I just keep thinking about it, and I know I shouldn't. I've dated guys. I like guys. But lately She trailed off, and I could feel the electricity start to hum in the space between us. "You what?" I asked, barely breathing. She met my eyes then, and I saw it. The raw curiosity, the fear, the wanting. "I just want to try it once, just to know what it's like." For a long second, I couldn't move. Every thought collided inside my head. Desire, disbelief, caution, hope. "Emma," I said softly, "are you sure? You don't have to prove anything." She smiled faintly, nervous. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I just trust you." The words hit harder than I expected. I'd imagined her saying 100 things, but not that my pulse quickened. "You really don't know what you're asking for," I murmured. "I think I do." Her voice was barely above a whisper now, but it carried. She stood slowly, walked around the table, and stopped beside me. The faint scent of her shampoo, something clean and sweet, filled the air. I looked up at her, and her eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them. "Just once," she said, and then she leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't shy, not really. It was hesitant at first, like she was testing the shape of the moment, but the instant my lips moved against hers, she melted into it. Her fingers trembled as they brushed my jaw, and I felt a sound rise in my throat that I couldn't contain. Everything that had been careful and quiet between us burned away. I forgot the library, the fluorescent lights, the fact that she was supposed to be straight. All I felt was her. When we finally pulled apart, her breath was shallow, her pupils wide. She looked at me like she'd just discovered something terrifying and beautiful at once. That wasn't supposed to feel like that, she whispered. What did it feel like? I asked. She hesitated, then smiled faintly, like I've been missing something I didn't know I wanted. I wanted to tell her I'd dreamed of that moment for months, that she couldn't just kiss me like that and call it an experiment, but I stayed quiet. She gathered her things in a flurry, cheeks flushed. We should go, she said quickly. It's late. I stood, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, sure. We walked out together, the cool night air brushing against our skin. The campus was silent, every window dark except for the lamplight spilling from the library behind us. At the corner, she stopped, her hand brushing mine for a fleeting second. This doesn't have to mean anything, she said, though she didn't sound convinced. Okay? I forced a smile. Sure, just an experiment. She nodded, eyes lingering on me a moment too long before she turned away, but as I watched her disappear into the night, my heart was already whispering the truth. One night would never be enough. For the next 2 days, I couldn't stop replaying that night in my head. Every time I tried to study, her face interrupted the lines of text. The memory of her lips barking through me like static. Emma acted as if nothing had happened. She still sat beside me in class, still took notes in her neat handwriting, still wore those oversized sweaters that somehow made her look even smaller, more unreachable. But there was a new energy under her calm, an awareness in every glance we exchanged. She avoided looking at me for too long, and when she did, her cheeks flushed before she turned away quickly, pretending to focus. I wanted to tell myself it was better this way, that she'd gotten what she wanted and moved on. But the truth was, I missed her, like something was physically missing from me by Thursday. I couldn't take it anymore. I found her in the library again, sitting at our usual corner, surrounded by open books. The light caught the curve of her jaw as she scribbled a note in the margin. She didn't notice me at first. And for a moment, I just watched her, the way her fingers moved precise and soft, how she bit her lower lip when she concentrated. When I finally sat down, she looked up, startled. Hey, she said a little too quickly. Didn't expect to see you here. You always expect me here, I said with a small smile. She tried to smile back, but her eyes flickered nervously to the side. About that night, she began, and my heart jumped, even though I'd known this was coming. Emma, it's fine, I said, cutting her off before she could apologize. You don't owe me an explanation. I know, but I need to say it anyway, she murmured. I don't know what came over me. It was late, I was tired, and maybe I just wanted to feel something new. She spoke softly, almost rehearsed. I nodded slowly. Okay. She looked up sharply. You're not mad? Why would I be? I said, though it hurt a little more than I'd expected. You wanted to try something. You did. That's all. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. She turned a page she hadn't read. I pretended to look at my notes, but the silence between us wasn't calm. It was charged, trembling. Finally, she exhaled and said quietly, Did you think about it after? I glanced up, caught the flicker in her eyes. Did you? I asked back. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. She just looked away, her hand gripping the pen tighter. That was all the answer I needed. The next night, I was half asleep when there was a knock on my door. My heart jumped instantly. No one came by at this hour except her. When I opened the door, there she was. Hair slightly messy, sweatshirt hanging off one shoulder, eyes wide and uncertain. I shouldn't be here, she whispered. I stepped aside anyway, and she walked in like she was fighting herself with every step. The air felt different with her inside my room. Heavier, more electric. You couldn't sleep? I asked softly. She hesitated. I couldn't stop thinking about it, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I told myself it was a mistake, but I can't stop thinking about how it felt. Her confession hit me like a wave. I wanted to reach for her, but I waited, afraid she'd bolt again. So what are you doing here, Emma? I asked, my voice low. She took a slow breath, then met my eyes. I don't know. I just need to feel it again. The moment stretched thin, pulsing with tension until she finally stepped closer. Her hand brushed mine, tentative, but her body betrayed her restraint. Her breathing quickened, Her cheeks flushed. I didn't move. I wanted her to choose it. And she did. She closed the distance and kissed me again, firmer this time, no hesitation. Her hands slid to my shoulders, then to the back of my neck, pulling me closer like she couldn't stand the space between us. I felt the same ache I'd tried to bury explode back to life, raw and hungry. When we finally broke apart, her eyes were glassy, lips slightly swollen. God, she whispered, why does this feel so right when it's supposed to be wrong? Because maybe it's not wrong, I murmured. She shook her head quickly, though her hands didn't move away. No, it is. It has to be. But even as she said it, she leaned into me again, as if her body refused to believe her own words. Later, as we lay side by side on the couch, the world outside silent and small, I watched her trace invisible patterns on my arm. She didn't speak for a long time, and I didn't push. Then quietly she said, "We can't keep doing this." I smiled faintly into the dark. "We probably will." She turned to look at me, eyes soft and conflicted. "I hate that you're right." I brushed her hair from her face. "Then don't think about it, just be here." She hesitated, then rested her head against my shoulder, sighing like she was surrendering to something inevitable. I wanted to freeze that moment, the quiet, the warmth, the way she fit perfectly against me. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't last. Emma didn't belong in secrets or shadows. She'd wake up tomorrow and call it a mistake again, and still, I couldn't stop falling for her because even then, as her breathing slowed beside me, I already knew this wasn't the end of it. It was just the beginning of something neither of us would be able to undo. Days became something we endured. Nights were what we lived for. By daylight, Emma went back to being the perfect student. She sat 2 rows ahead in class, hair neatly tied, back straight, taking notes with the same precision she always had. If she caught my gaze, she'd look away too quickly, as though the light itself might expose us. But at night, she changed. Sometimes she'd knock softly at my door. Sometimes she'd just text me to meet in the old music room or the back corner of the library, where the lights always flickered. She was never the first to touch, not at first. But when she did, it was like the mask of the day burned away. I learned to read her moods. The way she twisted her fingers meant she was nervous. When she tucked her hair behind her ear twice, she was thinking about me but trying not to. I noticed the small tremor in her hand when she reached for a book and her skin brushed mine by accident. I could tell she hated herself for wanting it, but she couldn't help it, neither could I. Every night was a quiet war between what we said we wouldn't do and what we already knew we would. One Friday evening, after everyone had left the library, I found her waiting by the window. Her sweater was off, replaced by a dark t-shirt I'd never seen before, and her hair fell loosely around her shoulders. The lamplight softened her, made her look older, freer. She turned when she heard me, and that same look, the one that made everything inside me tilt, flashed in her eyes. "You're late," she said, but there was a smile tugging at her lips. "You didn't tell me we were meeting," I replied. "Didn't I?" she asked quietly. And that was enough. When I reached her, she didn't move back. Her hand rested on the windowsill, and the faint city glow painted her skin in silver. "I keep thinking about what you said," she whispered, "that maybe it's not wrong." I hesitated. And I don't know if I believe you." Her voice trembled slightly. "But I want to." That small confession did something to me. I stepped closer until her breath mixed with mine. The air between us grew warmer, heavier, filled with things we couldn't name. She closed her eyes when I touched her cheek, leaning into the contact like she'd been waiting all day for it. The kiss this time wasn't rushed or uncertain. It was slow, deliberate, as if we both needed to memorize the rhythm of it. Her hand slid up my arms and stopped at my collar, holding me there like she needed to feel I was real. My heart pounded against hers, but what made it overwhelming wasn't how close we were. It was how much meaning every tiny movement carried. She pulled back just enough to breathe out my name, and the way she said it made my chest ache. There was no confusion in her tone, no experiment in her touch. Only wanting later, we sat on the windowsill, legs tangled, the cool air brushing our skin. She rested her head against my shoulder. "I hate how I can't stop this," she said softly. "You could stop," I whispered, "if you really wanted to." She looked up at me then, her eyes shining faintly in the low light. "That's the problem, I don't want to." I laughed under my breath, not mocking, just relieved. "Then stop pretending you do." She shook her head. "You don't understand, I'm not like you. I don't know how to be this out loud. In the morning, I'll tell myself it was a mistake again. And at night? I asked. At night, she said, touching my hand. I'll tell myself it's the only thing that feels right. The sound of footsteps in the hall made her stiffen. We froze, hearts racing, until they faded. She exhaled shakily, pressing her forehead against mine. We're going to get caught one day. Maybe, I said. Would that be so bad? She smiled sadly. You'd handle it. I wouldn't. That was the difference between us. She lived in two worlds, and I'd already given mine up to her. We left separately that night, slipping through shadows, pretending to be strangers again. The next morning in class, she was back to the composed Emma, the one everyone admired but no one really saw. She raised her hand to answer a question, and her voice was steady, calm. But when she passed me her notebook, her fingers brushed mine for half a second longer than necessary, a spark, quick but real. It was her way of saying, I remember. That night, she didn't come by. Neither did the next. I told myself it was fine, that she needed space, but the ache didn't fade. I missed the small sounds she made when she laughed, the warmth of her breath against my neck, the way she whispered my name like it was a secret too beautiful to speak out loud. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was doing the same somewhere across campus. On the third night, just when I'd convinced myself it was over, there was a soft knock on my door. My heart leapt before my body even moved. When I opened it, she stood there, hair damp from rain, eyes wide and tired. She didn't say anything, just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me, holding on like she was afraid I might disappear. I held her back, feeling her heartbeat against mine. And in that quiet moment, I understood. She wasn't coming here to experiment anymore. She was coming because she didn't know how to be anywhere else. And as I buried my face in her shoulder, I knew I was in too deep to turn back. I didn't care, because if what we had was wrong, then I never wanted to be right again. We'd been living in that fragile balance for weeks, pretending in the daylight, losing ourselves to each other at night. It was dangerous, beautiful, impossible, and it was starting to fall apart. I could feel it in the way Emma hesitated before knocking, in the longer pauses between our messages, in how her eyes darted round whenever we were in public together. She was getting scared, not of me, but of herself. One afternoon I found her sitting alone under the old oak tree near the science building. Her books were open, but she wasn't reading. She was staring at nothing, jaw tense, tapping her pen against her knee. I walked over quietly. Hey, I said, sitting beside her. She didn't look up. Hey. Her tone was soft, distracted. You okay? I asked. She laughed a little, but it sounded hollow. Fine, okay. I wanted to reach for her, but the courtyard was full of people. Did something happen? She turned finally, and there was a flicker of something fragile in her eyes. I saw my roommate's text last night. She was talking about us. She said she's noticed how much time I spend with you. My stomach dropped. What did she say? That it's weird, that people are starting to talk. She bit her lip, shaking her head. I told her she was imagining things, but I think she knows. The silence that followed was heavy. I wanted to tell her it didn't matter, that we could handle it, but I saw the fear in her, the same fear I'd fought through years ago. You don't have to explain anything to anyone, I said quietly. They'll move on to something else. She shook her head again. You don't get it. You've always been strong enough to not care what people think. I'm not built that way. She closed her notebook, her movements sharp, controlled. Maybe we should take a break. The words hit like a slap even though her voice trembled when she said them. A break? I repeated. Emma, that's not going to make people stop talking. It'll just make us miserable. Maybe that's better than being scared all the time, she said. She stood up, and I stood too, blocking her path gently. So what are you scared of? Them or yourself? She froze, eyes flashing. Both, she whispered before walking away. I didn't see her for 3 days. It was like she'd vanished. She skipped our usual study sessions, ignored my messages. Each night I'd sit by the window waiting for that soft knock, that familiar whisper of her voice, and it never came. I started to think maybe she'd really ended it, that I'd just been a chapter in her experiment. But on the fourth night, around midnight, there was a sudden, frantic knock at my door. When I opened it, she was standing there, drenched from the rain, hair clinging to her face, eyes wild. I can't do it, she said breathlessly. I can't pretend you don't exist. Before I could speak, she kissed me, desperate, unrestrained, nothing like before. It wasn't about curiosity anymore. It was about need. Her hands clung to me like she was afraid I'd fade away if she let go. I pulled her inside, shut the door, and for a long moment, we just held each other, trembling. The rain hammered against the windows, the sound of it matching the rhythm of our hearts. When she finally pulled back, her breath came in uneven bursts. I tried to forget, she whispered, voice breaking. I told myself it was just a phase, but every time I closed my eyes, I see you. I brushed the wet hair from her face, then stopped fighting it. I can't, she said, but her hand slid to my neck again, contradicting every word. You already are, I murmured. That night, everything between us changed. There was no more pretense, no more restraint. We didn't rush, didn't speak much. We just let silence do the talking. The kind of silence that says I'm yours, even if I shouldn't be. The room was dark except for the faint light spilling through the curtains, painting her skin in silver and shadow. When she looked at me, her eyes were wide and honest, stripped of all the walls she built around herself. I'd never seen her like that. Afterwards, she lay beside me, her head on my chest, tracing small circles on my skin with her fingertips. Her voice was soft, fragile. This feels too real. It is real, I said, and that's what scares me. She looked up at me then, eyes glassy. I don't know what to do anymore. I can't be who I was before this. I smiled faintly, brushing my thumb along her cheek. Then don't be. You don't have to choose a label. You just have to choose what makes you feel alive. She closed her eyes, leaning into my touch. You make me feel alive, she whispered. Outside, the rain began to slow. The world felt quiet, suspended. I wanted to freeze that moment forever, to stay in the stillness of it, where nothing else existed but her heartbeat against mine, but I knew what morning would bring. There would be whispers, guilt, confusion, maybe even distance again. Yet even knowing that, I couldn't let her go because every time I looked at her, I saw the truth she was too afraid to say out loud. She wasn't just experimenting anymore. She was falling, and God help me, so was I. The sunlight slipped through the blinds, painting soft gold stripes across Clara's bare shoulder as she lay half asleep beside me. Her hair, usually tamed into neat ponytails, spilled over the pillow in wild waves, and the faint imprint of my lips was still visible on her collarbone. I'd never seen her look so unguarded, so human. My heart thudded softly in the silence, equal parts awe and disbelief. We had crossed every line we'd promised not to, and yet here she was, breathing quietly against me as if the world hadn't changed overnight. She stirred, blinking those honey brown eyes open, and when they met mine, she smiled, small, shy, and devastatingly real. You're staring, she murmured, voice rough from sleep. Because I still don't believe you're here, I whispered back, tracing a finger down her arm. Her laugh came out like a sigh. You say that every time. And you still keep coming back. She bit her lip, eyes flicking away for a moment before finding me again. Maybe I stopped pretending I didn't want to. It was strange how something so messy could feel so pure for weeks. We'd been walking a tightrope between friendship and something else. Something that kept dragging us back into each other's orbit no matter how many times we tried to end it. We told ourselves it was just an experiment, a phase, a secret indulgence we'd outgrow, but each night blurred into the next. Each touch unraveled us a little more until the word experiment stopped meaning anything at all. That morning, Clara wasn't the straight-A perfectionist with her neat handwriting and strict schedules. She was just a girl, trembling under my touch, eyes soft and full of something I hadn't dared to name before. We made breakfast together, or at least tried to. She burned the toast. I dropped the butter knife twice because she kept brushing her hand against mine when she accidentally smeared jam across her cheek. I leaned in to wipe it off, and she froze halfway through a laugh. Don't, she whispered. Don't what? Her voice trembled when she said it. Don't make me fall harder. I cupped her face anyway. Too late. The words hung between us, terrifying and beautiful. She kissed me first, this time. No hesitation, no nervous laughter to hide behind. It wasn't the wild, breathless kind of kiss we used to share in secret. It was soft, deliberate, full of the quiet promise that maybe, just maybe, this was something real. We spent the rest of the day pretending life wasn't waiting outside that tiny apartment. No professors, no roommates, no expectations, just us. Tangled in the sheets, whispering stories about who we might become if the world wasn't watching. She told me about the pressure she felt to be perfect, about how lonely it was being the girl everyone admired but no one really knew. I told her I'd stopped believing in love until her. She laughed at that, said I was too dramatic, but her eyes glistened when she said it, and I knew she believed me. The hardest part was knowing we couldn't stay there forever. When she gathered her things that evening, her movements were careful, like every zipper and folded shirt carried a goodbye inside it. I stood by the window, arms crossed, trying not to look like I was breaking. Clara, she paused, turning to face me. Yeah? I took a step closer, the words tangling on my tongue. If this ever stops feeling right. She cut me off with a kiss that tasted like salt and sunlight. Then it was still worth it. When she walked out the door, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore, not of what people might say, not of what we were, not even of the uncertainty, because what we had wasn't just desire or curiosity. It was something born out of late-night confessions and trembling hands, out of a girl who thought she knew exactly who she was until love asked her to look again. Weeks later, we found a rhythm. She still studied like her life depended on it, still corrected my grammar when I teased her, but she also reached for my hand under the table in cafes. We didn't need to hide in the dark anymore. Her smile had changed. Less guarded, more hers. And for the first time, so had mine. Sometimes I think back to that first night, how she'd said, just once. I smile now because once became always before either of us even noticed. Love has a way of rewriting the rules, of turning an experiment into something permanent. And maybe that's what makes it so terrifying and so worth it. I never planned to fall for her. She never meant to fall for me. But somewhere between the laughter and the whispered apologies, we stopped pretending, and maybe that's what real love is, when pretending isn't enough anymore. I used to think falling for a straight girl was the worst kind of mistake. But when she looked at me that last night, eyes soft with the kind of love you can't fake, I realized we'd crossed a forbidden line, and somehow found ourselves on the other side. Whole. Maybe love doesn't always follow rules. Maybe it just happens quietly until it feels impossible to let go. Tell me, if it were you, would you risk everything for one person who made the world make sense? Drop your thoughts below. I want to know how our story made you feel.